I asked my son when the family barbecue was happening. He replied, "Mom, it was yesterday. We forgot to tell you. There were only important people there." I stayed silent. A week later, he called me. "Mom, I need $5,000 urgently." I answered, "I forgot to tell you." Those words left me paralyzed in front of my kitchen sink. I had the phone pressed to my ear and felt the air escaping from my chest, like when you get hit unexpectedly. "There were only important people there," repeated David. My only son, with that casual tone you use to talk about the weather or to say you forgot to buy milk. Important? I was not important. I looked toward the table where I had left the bowl with my special barbecue sauce, the one David had loved since he was a child. I had prepared it that very morning, thinking I would take it to the family gathering. Next to the bowl was the gift I bought for Matthew, my 7-year-old grandson. A remote control car that I saw downtown and that cost me 3 weeks of savings. $40 that I set aside penny by penny from my pension. "Mom, are you still there?" David's voice sounded impatient, as if I were the one making a mistake. "Yes, son, I am here." My voice came out calmer than I expected, but inside something was breaking. It was not the first time they had left me out, but this time there was something different in his tone. Something that made me understand it had not been an oversight. "Well, Mom, you know how Brenda is with gatherings. She wanted it to be something intimate, only close family." He paused. "Anyway, I have to go. I have to take Matthew to his swimming class. We will talk later." "Okay." He hung up before I could respond. I stayed there, standing with the phone in my hand, watching how the lilac bushes in the garden moved with the afternoon wind. This house in the suburbs had been the center of all gatherings for 40 years. Here we celebrated David's birthdays. Here we held the wake for my Robert when he left us 12 years ago. Here Matthew took his first steps, and now suddenly I was not close family. Brenda, my daughter-in-law, the woman who entered our family 5 years ago like a fresh breeze, and who little by little became a hurricane that pushed me out of my own territory. But that afternoon, in front of that sauce and that undelivered gift, I still did not understand how far her plan went. I walked toward the living room and sat in my usual chair, the one next to the window. From there, I could see my grandmother's antique clock hanging on the wall, the one that chimed the hours with a special sound that had accompanied my entire life. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. At that time, I should be arriving at David's house with my sauce and my hug for Matthew, but I was here alone, uninvited. If you asked me what I felt at that moment, I would tell you it was like falling into a very deep well, where your own voice bounces back and no one hears you. Because it was not just about a barbecue, it was about a clear message. Your place in this family no longer exists. What I did not know is that this was just the beginning. Because a week later, when the phone rang again and I saw David's name on the screen, my life was about to take a turn that I had not imagined, even in my worst nightmares. But we will talk about that in a moment. First, I need you to understand who I was before all this. Because to understand how I fell so low, you need to know from what height I began to crumble. If this story is touching your heart, like and subscribe to the channel Elderly Stories so you can continue hearing real testimonies like this one. My name is Olivia. I am 68 years old, and for most of my life I was the backbone of my family. I do not say it with arrogance, I say it as a fact. That is how my mother raised me. That is how I lived, and that is how I thought I would die. Surrounded by my loved ones, respected, loved. This house, where I now live alone, I inherited from my parents. It is an old construction with high ceilings, mosaic floors, and a garden that my father planted with his own hands. The lilac bushes that I like so much were a gift from my mother when I turned 15, so that you always have color in your life. "Honey," she told me. 53 years passed, and those lilacs continue to bloom every spring stronger than ever. Here I married Robert. Here David was born here. I built my sewing studio in what used to be the laundry room. For 30 years, I worked sewing prom dresses, baptism suits, alterations of all kinds. My hands were always busy, always creating something beautiful for someone. Robert was an electrician, a hard-working man, quiet, one of those who do not promise the moon, but build you a solid roof. He died of a heart attack 12 years ago when David was 30. It was so sudden that we could not even say goodbye. One Tuesday, he was fixing the wiring in a building downtown, and by Wednesday at dawn, he was gone. I was left a widow at 56 with a paid-off house, some savings, and an adult son who already worked as an engineer in a construction company. I thought the worst had passed. I thought I had weathered the biggest storm of my life. How wrong I was during those years of widowhood. My house became the meeting point. Every Sunday, I made roast beef stew or barbecue. My sister Grace came with her children, David's cousins, and they filled the garden with laughter. Matthew, who was then just a baby, slept in my arms while I chatted with my friends on the porch. Brenda had not yet appeared on the scene. My grandmother's wall clock marked each of those gatherings with its special chime. That clock is more than 100 years old. It is hand-carved mahogany wood with golden Roman numerals and a pendulum that swings with a hypnotic rhythm. My grandmother brought it from the South when she got married, and she always said that as long as that clock continued to tell time, the family would remain united. I believed in that promise as if it were a sacred pact. David met Brenda at a work conference 6 years ago. She was a public relations officer for an events company, pretty self-assured with that type of confidence that comes from being raised in a family with money. From the first time I brought her home, I noticed something in her gaze when she looked around the rooms. It was not admiration, it was evaluation. "What a big house for you alone, Olivia." She told me the second time she came calling me by my first name, as if we were already close friends. "Doesn't it scare you to be here with so much empty space?" "It is my home," I replied with a smile. "Here are all my memories." "Memories do not pay the property tax or the electricity," she replied with a laugh that pretended to be funny, but that left a bitter taste in my mouth. David defended her. "Brenda is right, Mom. You should consider something smaller, easier to maintain." It was the first time my son suggested that I leave the house of my life. It would not be the last. They got married 5 years ago in an elegant hotel downtown which cost a fortune. Brenda wanted everything big. Imported dress banquet for 200 people, live band and orchestra. I contributed $5,000 from my savings to help with the expenses money I earned sewing for 2 full years. "We will pay you back," Mom promised David. I am still waiting. After the wedding, things began to change little by little, so slowly that at first I did not notice. The Sunday gatherings became bi-weekly, then monthly, until they practically disappeared. Brenda always had an excuse. That Matthew had activities, that she had courses, that David was tired. "Why don't you come to our house instead, Olivia?" she suggested. But when I went, I felt like just another visitor, not like the grandmother of the family. My sewing studio kept running, although with fewer clients than before. The ladies of the neighborhood still looked for me, but my hands were no longer as fast as in my 40s. Even so, that space was my refuge, my place where I was still Olivia, the seamstress, the one who solved problems with needle and thread. I kept my tools in a wooden box that Robert made for me when we celebrated 10 years of marriage. Inside, I have scissors of 3 sizes, needles of all thicknesses, colored threads that look like an organized rainbow. Every time I open that box, I feel that Robert is still here taking care of me. But loneliness has a weight that no toolbox can support. And then came the call about the barbecue. That we forgot to tell you there were only important people that broke me in two. That night, after hanging up with David, I stared at the bowl with the sauce that no one would taste. I threw it down the sink and cried while the water carried away the spices, the garlic, the roasted tomatoes. I felt I was throwing away something more than food. I was throwing away the illusion that I still mattered. What I did not know was that in exactly 7 days, David would call me again. But this time, it would not be to exclude me from a gathering. it would be to ask me for $5,000 with the nerve of someone who believes I am an ATM without feelings. And there, facing that request, something inside me finally woke up. The exclusion did not come suddenly like a slammed door. It arrived like humidity in the walls, slow and visible, until one day you turn around and the whole structure is rotten. After the call about the barbecue, I started remembering other times. Small moments that at the time I justified with excuses, but that now, placed one after another, formed a pattern that turned my stomach. Matthew's 6th birthday, for example. I spent 3 days baking his favorite cake, red velvet with fresh frosting. I decorated it with edible toy cars that I made with fondant because Matthew was obsessed with cars. I arrived at his party with the cake in my hands, excited to see his little face light up. But when I entered the garden of his house, there was already another cake on the table, a huge one from an expensive bakery with a superhero design in 3 tiers. "Oh, Olivia, we didn't know if you were going to be able to come," Brenda told me with that smile I was already starting to know very well. "That is why we ordered this other one. But what a nice detail you brought. We can save it for later." Matthew did not even turn to look at my cake. All the children were around the superhero one, screaming excitedly. I stood there holding my homemade cake like a fool, feeling that my 3 days of work were worth nothing. "Did you not know if I was coming to my own grandson's birthday?" I asked David later when I found him alone in the kitchen. "It is just that you never confirm on time, Mom," he answered without even looking me in the eyes. "Brenda needs exact numbers to plan things well." That was the first time I felt they were turning me into a problem to be solved, not the grandmother of the family. Then came Christmas last year. We'd always celebrated Christmas Eve at my house. It was tradition. I made the turkey. Grace brought the side dishes, and among all of us, we set up the dinner while the men put up the tree. At 11 at night, we opened gifts under my tree, that artificial pine I have had for 20 years, and that is already half worn, but holds more memories than any new tree. But that year, in early December, David called me. "Mom, this year we are going to do dinner at Brenda's parents' house. It is just that her mom is in delicate health and cannot travel much. And why don't you bring her to my house? Here there is room for everyone. It is just that everything is already planned there, Mom. They already ordered the food. They already have everything ready. Next year, we will do it at your house, I promise." I spent Christmas Eve watching holiday specials on television, eating leftover chicken that I reheated in the microwave. My grandmother's clock struck 12, and each chime reminded me that I was completely alone. Grace invited me to her house, but I told her no. My pride was still intact back then. I still believed that if I acted strong, if I did not show weakness, things would return to normal. How naive I was. In January, Brenda had a birthday. David organized a lunch at an Italian restaurant downtown. They invited me, of course, but when I arrived, I realized they had seated me at the end of the table, far from the birthday girl, among people I did not know. Brenda was in the center, surrounded by her friends, her mom, her sister. They laughed. Toasted took photos that I later saw on Facebook with hashtags like Best Family and Best People. I did not appear in any photo. When the bill came, David approached me. "Mom, can you support us with your share? It is $50. $50 for a meal where they did not even talk to me, where I was just another piece of furniture in the decoration." I paid. Of course I paid. Because that is what mothers do, right? We pay. We keep quiet. We endure, hoping that someday they return to us, even if it is a crumb of the love we gave. But the straw that broke the camel's back was in March, 3 months before the call about the barbecue. Brenda organized a party at her house to celebrate her promotion at work. As I learned later from Grace, she invited 40 people, family, friends, co-workers. There was a taco truck, open bar live music. I found out on Facebook. I saw the photos 2 days later. There was my sister Grace with her husband. There were David's cousins. There were Brenda's in-laws, her aunts, her friends. Even the neighbor across the street was in the photos. Everyone except me. I called David crying. I could not contain myself. Why didn't you invite me?" There was an uncomfortable silence on the other side. "Mom, it is just that Brenda says you always make uncomfortable comments about her food and her way of decorating. She says you make her feel bad. We prefer to avoid the drama. What comments?" "When have I said something bad?" "Well, once you said her rice was too salty. Another time that her curtains were too dark. They are small things, Mom, but they accumulate." I stayed speechless. Those were my great offenses, casual comments that anyone makes in confidence. "Besides," continued David with a tone that froze my blood, "sometimes it is better that everyone has their space. You have your life. We have ours." That night, I hugged the wool shawl my mother knitted before dying. I put it over my shoulders and rocked in my chair, looking at the dark garden, feeling they were erasing me from my own family. The clock struck 11. Each chime echoed in the silence of my empty house. And then just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, the phone rang 7 days after the forgotten barbecue. It was David. "Mom, I need $5,000 urgently." David's voice sounded different now. Urgent. Needy. The same voice he used when he was a boy and wanted something desperately. "It is an investment opportunity I cannot let pass, Mom. A project from a coworker's safe. But I need the money this week. You know I always pay you back." I stayed silent, feeling the rage rising up my throat like hot lava. He always pays me back. The $5,000 I contributed for his wedding, he never returned. The $2,500 I lent him 2 years ago for the down payment on the car, not a dollar back. The $800 I gave him for Brenda's dental treatment evaporated. And now, after excluding me from the barbecue for not being important people, he had the nerve to ask me for $5,000 more. "Mom, are you there? I need you to deposit tomorrow early to manage the transfer." Something inside me broke, but not like a plate that falls and makes noise. It broke like when an electric cable snaps inside, silent, invisible, but definitive. "Son?" I said with a calm that surprised myself. "I forgot to tell you that I do not have that money available. I only have money for important people." The silence on the other side was absolute. "What did you say? What you heard?" "I forgot to tell you just like you forgot to tell me about the family gathering. But Mom, this is serious. It is an investment. It is not the same. For me, it is the same David. For years, I have been important only when you need something. Money to take care of Matthew, to sew a dress to lend my house. But for celebrations, for photos, for family, there I am not important people. Do not exaggerate. You have always been part of the family." "Oh, really?" "Then tell me, why didn't you invite me to Brenda's promotion party? Why did I spend Christmas Eve alone? Why did my cake for Matthew's birthday end up in the trash?" "Those are different things, Mom. Do not mix everything. No, son. They are not different things. Everything is part of the same thing. You use me when it suits you and discard me when it does not." David exploded. "I cannot believe you are so selfish. I am asking for help and you come out with these soap opera dramas. I am your son, and I am your mother. But it seems that only matters when you need money." I hung up. My hands were trembling. My heart beat so strong I could feel it in my temples. But for the first time in years, I was not crying from sadness. I was crying from rage, from indignation, from a strength I thought I had lost. The phone started ringing again. David. I let it ring until he got tired. Then I saw the WhatsApp messages coming in one after another. "Mom, don't be like that." "Let's talk calmly. I swear this time I will pay you back. Please, it is urgent." "Brenda says you are being manipulative." That last message gave me such a laugh that I had to sit down. Me, manipulative me, who gave everything without asking for anything in return. Me who silenced every humiliation just to not cause problems. Me who swallowed my pain to not ruin their parties, their celebrations, their perfect life. I turned off the phone. And there, sitting in my living room, I started remembering all the times I was important to them. when Matthew was a baby and Brenda had her weekend courses, which turned out to be trips with friends to the lake house. Can you watch him for us, Olivia? It is just that we already paid for the hotel, and there is no refund. I stayed with Matthew from Friday afternoon until Sunday night. Diapers, bottles, sleepless nights. I was 63 then, and my knees hurt from carrying the baby so long when they needed me to sew Brenda's niece's dress for her graduation. It is just that you sew so beautifully, Olivia, and the dressmakers charge so much. I spent 2 weeks working on that dress. Wine-colored taffeta hand embroidered on the bodice, perfect adjustments. I charged them only the cost of the fabric. They did not even thank me when the niece won a prize for the best dress. When David had that tax problem and needed a co-signer for a loan of $3,000. Just sign here, Mom. It is just paperwork. I signed. Of course I signed. Turns out it was not just paperwork. David missed 2 monthly payments and the bank started calling me. I had to pay $1,000 from my pension so they wouldn't sue me. And the list went on and on. That night, I counted in a notebook all the money I had lent them in the last 5 years. With a red pen, I noted every amount, every date, every promise of I will pay you back next month. The total sum took my breath away. $10,000. Almost $10,000 that came out of my pension, from my sewing, from selling some of my mother's jewelry. Money I could have used to fix the roof that leaks in the rainy season, to change the old bathroom plumbing, to give myself at least a small vacation. But no, I gave it all to them, hoping that would buy me a place at their table, in their life, in their heart. How foolish I was. I closed the notebook and put it in the drawer of my nightstand next to the house deed and my will. And then for the first time in a long time, I started thinking clearly. If they only looked for me when they needed something, then the day I had nothing to give, I would disappear completely from their lives unless I changed the rules of the game. And there, in that night of silence and contained courage, my plan began. 3 days passed since I hung up on David. 3 days where I ignored his calls, his messages, his attempts to make me feel guilty. Then he appeared at my door on a Wednesday afternoon. He rang the doorbell insistently, and when I opened, his face was red with indignation. "Mom, we have to talk. I have nothing to talk about, David. I already told you I do not have that money. It is not just the money," he entered without me. Inviting him, walked straight to the living room and dropped onto the armchair as if it were his house. "Brenda is very upset with you." I remained standing in the doorframe, arms crossed. "Brenda is upset. And what did I do now? You told Aunt Grace that we treat you badly, that we exclude you from gatherings. Aunt Grace told my cousin Faith, and now the whole family is asking what is happening. You are making us look bad." The laugh that came out of my throat sounded bitter, even to me. "I am making you look bad, David. You did not invite me to the barbecue. You did not invite me to Brenda's party. I spent Christmas alone. Doesn't that seem like making me look bad?" "Those are exaggerations of yours, I told you. Sometimes it is better to have separate spaces. But when you need money, or for me to take care of Matthew, there are no separate spaces, right?" He stood up furious. "You know what? Brenda was right about you. She says you are manipulative, that you use the victim role to control us. She says that since we got married, you have tried to meddle in our relationship." Those words hit me like stones. Meddle David. I have only wanted to be part of the family. I have only wanted to see my grandson grow. I have only wanted... Well, your way of loving is very toxic, Mom. The silence that followed was so heavy, it could almost be touched. Toxic. My voice came out barely as a whisper. "Taking care of your son when you went on trips is toxic. Lending you money you never pay back is toxic. Sewing dresses for free for your wife's family is toxic. It is not about that." Then what is it about son? Explain to me how I went from being your mother to being a problem that needs to be solved. David ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Look, Mom, I came to ask you to stop speaking badly of us with the family and about the money. Seriously, I need it. It is to pay some credit cards that piled up on us. If I do not pay this week, they are going to charge us very high interest. There was the truth. It was no investment, it was debt. And why do you have such big debts? It is none of your business. Of course it is my business if you are asking for my money to pay them. God, Mom, why do you have to be so difficult? I just need you to help me this time and that's it. This time, David, I have helped you 20 times, and not once have you fulfilled paying me back. Because something always comes up. Matthew needs something. School has to be paid. The car has to be fixed. Things cost money. Then stop spending on things you cannot pay for. Stop going to expensive restaurants, buying designer clothes, pretending what you are not. His eyes narrowed dangerously. You know what Brenda says, you are resentful because we have a better life than the one you had. She says that is why you always criticize us. That was too much. Out of my house. What? Get out. Now. Mom, I said get out. David. And the next time you come, it will be because you really want to see me, not my wallet. He stood looking at me with a mixture of surprise and rage I had never seen in him. Finally, he took his keys and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned. Do you know what Brenda told me when she met you, that you seemed like one of those mothers-in-law who never let go of their children? And I told her no, that you were not like that, but I think she was right. The door closed, and I was left alone in my living room, shaking from head to toe. I let myself fall into my chair next to the window. The lilac bushes moved with the wind, indifferent to my pain. My grandmother's clock struck 5 times, and there, in that devastating silence, I understood something that broke my soul. I had lost my son. Not to death, not to distance. I had lost him to a woman who convinced him that his mother was the problem, and he chose to believe her. I cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's death. I cried hugging my mother's shawl that smelled of lavender and memories. I cried for all the years I gave without receiving, for all the times I kept quiet to not cause problems, for all the humiliations I swallowed with a smile. But between the tears, something else was being born, a decision, a determination. Because if I had already lost them, if there was nothing left to save, then I had nothing to lose. And a woman who has nothing to lose is the most dangerous woman in the world. That night I took out my notebook again, but now I did not only note the money they owed me, I noted every humiliation, every exclusion, every lie. I wrote dates, names, witnesses, and began to make calls. The first was to my sister Grace. I need you to tell me everything Brenda has said about me at family gatherings. Everything. Grace did not need begging. In a 2-hour call, my sister uncovered a world I had preferred not to see. Turns out Brenda had been poisoning my image in front of the whole family for years. At gatherings where I was not present, she dropped comments wrapped in concern. Poor Olivia. It is just that, at that age, she gets strange ideas, right? Oh, wow, it is just that the mother-in-law always wants to give her opinion on how we educate Matthew. But these are other times. Small drops of poison that over time formed a river. Last week, Grace told me with contained rage. At Faith's birthday party, Brenda said you asked David to give you a monthly allowance because your pension is not enough. She said you played the victim to get money out of them. I stayed speechless. Me ask them for money. Grace, it is exactly the opposite. They are the ones who have taken almost $10,000 from me in 5 years. My sister sighed on the other side of the line. I know Olivia. I have always known how the situation is. But Brenda is very good at twisting things. She has half the world eating out of her hand. That conversation opened my eyes. They had not only excluded me, they had defamed me. My own family believed I was a burden, a manipulator, a meddling mother-in-law, and I had been so busy trying to recover their love that I never defended my name. 2 days after that revelation, I received a message from David. Not a call, a WhatsApp message. Mom, I thought better of it. I know we had a disagreement, but you are my mother and have always been there for me. I need to ask you a huge favor. Can you lend me the $5,000? It is urgent. This time, I will sign a promissory note and pay you in 6 months with interest. Please. I read the message 3 times. I looked for the apology for calling me toxic. I looked for the acknowledgement of having excluded me. I looked for even a pardon for what I told you. There was nothing of that, only the request for money. I took my time to respond. In fact, I took 2 days. Finally, I wrote, "Son, I forgot to tell you that I allocated that money to other important things. I only have money for people who treat me with respect and value me. I hope you understand. The response arrived in 30 seconds. I cannot believe it. Seriously, you are going to do this to me? I am not doing anything to you, David. I am just applying the same rule as you. Everyone with their space." Remember, a wave of messages followed. First, he tried to make me feel guilty. "I am your only son, Mom. Is this how you are going to let me fall?" Then he tried pity. "They are going to repossess the car if I do not pay." Finally came the attack. "Brenda is right. You are a resentful woman who cannot stand seeing us doing well." I did not respond to anything. But on the 3rd day, I received a call from a number I did not know. I answered thinking it was a client from the studio. Olivia Ramirez. Yes. "Who is speaking? I am Mr. Evans, an accountant. I am a friend of your godfather, John. He asked me to call you. John was David's baptism godfather, an honest man who worked at a bank. Tell me, Mr. Evans. Look, your godfather asked me to investigate something with discretion. Turns out your son and your daughter-in-law requested a loan at the bank where I work. As part of the process, I reviewed their credit history. My blood froze. And they have debts with 4 different credit cards. The total sum is $12,000. Also, they have a car loan overdue for 3 months. If they do not regularize their situation soon, the bank will proceed with the repossession." I felt the floor moving under my feet. $12,000. That is right. And from what I see in the statements, most of that money went on trips, restaurants, clothes, expenses that are not essential. I thanked him for the information and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table processing what I had just heard. Not only did they have huge debts, but they had built those debts living a life of luxuries they could not afford. And now they wanted me with my widow's pension and my life savings to save their ship, while they kept making holes. That night, I could not sleep. I stayed looking at the ceiling of my bedroom, listening to the tick-tock of my grandmother's clock from the living room. Each chime reminded me of my grandmother's words. While this clock continues telling time, the family will remain united. But what family one? Where they used me as a bank. One where they defamed me, behind my back one. Where my own son preferred to believe his wife before defending me. No, that was not a family. It was an illusion that I had insisted on keeping alive. And illusions, however beautiful they are, do not pay bills nor cure broken hearts. The next day, I did something I had never done. I asked for an appointment with my lawyer. Mr. Miller attended me in his office downtown. He was a 60-year-old man, discreet and professional, who had helped my family with paperwork since my father was alive. "Mrs. Olivia, how can I help you? I need to review my will and I need to protect my assets." The lawyer nodded and took out a folder. "Tell me what you have in mind." I explained everything, from the exclusions to the debts I discovered. From the loans they never returned to Brenda's defamation campaign. Mr. Miller listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me with something that looked like respect. "Mrs. Olivia, what you are living is more common than you think. Many older adults are seen as ATMs by their own children. My advice is that you protect your assets now before it is too late. What do you recommend? First, change your will. Second, create a trust for your grandson. Third, leave everything documented and with witnesses. We spent 2 hours reviewing options. In the end, I made decisions I never thought I would make. But before executing the plan, I needed one more thing: evidence. I called my friend Rachel, a woman my age who had been my confidant for 30 years. I asked her to be a witness to something I was about to do. "What do you have in mind, Olivia? I am going to record every conversation I have with David from now on. I need the truth to remain documented." Rachel taught me how to use the cell phone recorder. And so, armed with a legal plan and evidence that would accumulate, I prepared for the moment that would change everything. Because if I had learned something in these months of pain, it was this: love is not begged for, it is honored. And I had begged enough. Now it was time for them to learn what it meant to lose me. The next 3 weeks were of absolute silence between David and me. Not a call, not a message. It was as if I had died to them. But I was not sitting with my arms crossed. Rachel turned out to be an invaluable ally. Between the two of us, we started gathering evidence as if we were soap opera detectives. Only this was my real life. "Look," she told me one afternoon while we drank tea in my kitchen. "If you are going to do this, do it right. You need no one to be able to say you are inventing things." She was right. First, I took out all the receipts of bank transfers I had made to them over 5 years. Each deposit was there black on white, $10,000 that left my account to theirs. In none was there a receipt of return. Afterwards, I looked in my studio for all the sewing jobs I had done for free for Brenda's family. I found photos of the niece's graduation dress, of her little cousin's baptism suit, of the curtains I made for her house. I calculated how much I would have charged if they were normal clients: $2,000 in free work. Then there was the time I took care of Matthew. Rachel helped me make a chronological list. It turned out that in the last 3 years, I took care of my grandson a total of 86 full days. If they had hired a nanny, it would have cost them at least $50 a day. That added up to another $4,300. "Do you realize," Olivia said Rachel while we added up, "you have given them the equivalent of more than $16,000 between money and services, and not a thank you back." Seeing that number turned my stomach. But the most revealing part came when Grace, finally fed up with Brenda's lies, decided to help me. "I'm going to record for you what she said at the last gathering," she whispered to me on the phone. "There is going to be a lunch on Sunday at our cousin Faith's house. I am going to carry my cell phone recording in my bag." On Sunday, Grace arrived at the house at 6 in the afternoon with the audio. What I heard took my breath away. It was Brenda's voice, clear and loud. "Oh, girls, you don't know the drama Olivia makes for me." Now it turns out she got angry because we didn't invite her to a gathering, as if at her age she had to go from party to party. David has explained 1,000 times that we need our space, but she doesn't understand. Another voice, which I recognized as my cousin Faith's. "But didn't she ask you for money often?" Exactly, that is the worst. She asks us for help for her expenses. She says her pension is not enough. And when David tells her we cannot help her all the time, she gets in victim mode. It is exhausting. I had to pause the recording because my hands were shaking. "Continue," urged Grace. "Wait for what comes next." I pressed play again. Brenda continued. "The thing is that Olivia never really worked. She just sewed once in a while. She doesn't know what it is to have big responsibilities. And now she wants us who have children and real expenses to support her. But oh well, she is David's mom. We have to put up with her." Laughter in the background. Faith. "Oh, friend, what patience you have. Brenda, don't even get me started. The other day she wanted us to take care of her house because she was going to the doctor. Take care of her house. If she lives in the suburbs, no one is going to rob her. But she is super dramatic with everything. More laughter." I stopped the recording. Grace hugged me while I tried to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Not only had they stolen money from me, they had stolen my reputation, my dignity, my truth. "What are you going to do?" asked Grace. "I am going to keep gathering evidence," I answered with a calm I didn't know I had. "And when I have everything ready, I am going to call a family meeting." But not just any meeting, one where everyone hears the truth. That week, I visited Mr. Miller again. I showed him everything I had collected. Mrs. Olivia, this is enough for a legal case if you wanted to sue them for the money. I do not want to sue them, I said. I want them to see who has really been the manipulative one here. And I want to make sure they can never again use my name or my house for their benefits. The lawyer smiled slightly. Then let's proceed with the plan we discussed. I signed documents, many documents. With each signature, I felt lighter, as if I were releasing chains I had carried for years. The trust for Matthew was established. My house would be inherited by my grandson, but he could only access it at age 25. Meanwhile, it would be administered by Grace and Mr. Miller. David and Brenda would not touch even a brick, and if they try to contest the will, I asked. With all this documentation, it would be very difficult for them to win. Besides, we have witnesses of the situation of financial and emotional abuse you have lived. I left that office with a thick folder under my arm and a weight less on my heart. But the hardest part was missing the confrontation. I decided it would be in my house, in my territory. I would invite the whole family, Grace Faith, my cousins, the uncles, and of course David and Brenda. I would tell them I had an important announcement about my will. That would make them come running, thinking I was finally going to leave them everything. What surprises they would get, I prepared the invitations with care. A simple WhatsApp message, important family meeting Saturday, June 20th at 4 p.m. at my house. I have to announce decisions about my assets. It is important that everyone is present. The responses arrived almost immediately. Grace. I will be there, sister. Faith. How intriguing, Aunt. See you there. And the message I was waiting for from David. We will be there, Mom. Everything good, I responded with the same coldness he had used with me so many times. Everything perfect, son. See you Saturday. The following days I spent preparing my house. I cleaned every corner, pruned the lilac bushes that were lush, more than ever baked cornbread, and made iced tea. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted them to see, perhaps for the last time, what my house was like, when there was love and dignity in it. Rachel came to help me on Friday. Are you sure about this? Olivia Moore. Sure than ever. And if they get angry, and if David stops talking to you, definitely I stopped in the middle of the living room holding the duster in my hand. Rachel. He already stopped talking to me. He only looks for me when he wants something. If I lose him after this, in reality, I lose nothing because what was between us I already lost a long time ago. My friend nodded with tears in her eyes. That night before sleeping, I stood in front of my grandmother's clock. I cleaned it carefully, passing a soft cloth over the mahogany wood. Grandmother. I whispered you said that while this clock continued telling time the family would remain united. But sometimes you have to let things break so they can be put back together the right way. The clock struck 11 as it had done for more than 100 years, and I, for the first time in a long time, went to sleep in peace. Because I knew that Saturday, whatever happened, finally I would speak my truth. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, the type of perfect day that seems like a lie, as if the universe wanted to give me a last push of confidence. I got up early, took a long bath, and put on my terracotta-colored dress, the one Robert gave me on our last anniversary. I hadn't worn it since his funeral, but that day I felt it was the right moment. I tied my mother's wool shawl over my shoulders and looked in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was no longer the same one who begged for love 3 months ago. This woman had a straight back and clear eyes. At 2 p.m, Rachel arrived with her husband Henry to help me with the last preparations. Do you have everything ready? She asked while we arranged the chairs in the living room. I pointed toward the dining table. There was the manila envelope that would contain my future and theirs. Inside were copies of all documents, bank statements, transfer receipts, photos with dates of sewing jobs, the transcribed recording of Brenda defaming me, and of course the new will certified by Mr. Miller. All ready, I answered. At 3:30, the family began to arrive. Grace was the first. She gave me a long hug and whispered in my ear, "I am proud of you, sister." Faith arrived with her husband, Curious. The uncles, the cousins, everyone was filling my living room with that anticipatory murmur of, who knows something important is going to happen, but doesn't know what. At 4, sharp, as if they had calculated their arrival to make an entrance, David and Brenda rang the doorbell. I saw them through the curtain before opening. Brenda wore an impeccable white dress and high heels. David dress pants and ironed shirt. They came dressed for a celebration. How wrong they were. "Hello, Mom," said David when I opened, giving me a kiss on the cheek that tasted of acting. Olivia greeted Brenda with that smile that no longer fooled me. "Come in. Everyone is here." I guided them toward the living room. I saw how Brenda evaluated those present, with her gaze greeting with her false charm. They sat on the main sofa as if they were the guests of honor. I stood in front of everyone next to my grandmother's clock that marked exactly 4:10. Thanks to everyone for coming. I know I said I had an announcement about my assets, and so it is, but before getting to that, I need you to hear some things. The silence installed itself immediately. All gazes were placed on me. I breathed deep. 3 months ago, I called my son to ask him when the family barbecue would be. He answered that it had been the day before and that they had forgotten to tell me because there were only important people. I saw how Brenda tensed. David looked at the floor. That phrase broke something inside me, but what I didn't know then was that exclusion was just the tip of a much bigger iceberg. I took the manila envelope from the table. In this envelope, I have documents that show the truth of what my relationship with my son and my daughter-in-law has been in the last 5 years. The murmur ran through the room. First, we have the bank receipts. In 5 years, I have lent David $10,000, money he asked me for the down payment on his car for his wedding, for dental treatments, for emergencies that were never emergencies. Money he promised to return to me and that I never saw back. I took out the sheets and passed them to Grace to circulate. David turned pale. "Mom, it is not necessary. Let me finish, son." Second, I have here the photographs of all the sewing jobs I did for free for Brenda's family. If I had charged fairly, it would be $2,000. Third, there is the calculation of the time I took care of Matthew while you went on trips. 86 full days that with nanny rates equal $4,300. The sheets were passing from hand to hand. I saw the faces of astonishment of my cousins, the indignation of Grace. That adds up to more than $16,000 in money and services I gave, expecting only one thing: to be part of this family. Brenda tried to interrupt. "Olivia, this is—" I raised my hand. I haven't finished. I also have something very interesting here. I took out the transcript of the recording. This is what Brenda said about me at a family gathering 2 weeks ago, a gathering to which, of course, I was not invited. I began to read aloud. Every word she had said about me being a burden about me, asking them for money, about me being dramatic and manipulative. The silence was so dense it could be cut with a knife. When I finished reading, Brenda was red with fury and shame. That is taken out of context," she stuttered. "Seriously, because here I have the full audio if anyone wants to hear it. Faith." My cousin looked at her with contempt. "Brenda, you just made a fool of yourself." David finally exploded. "Mom, this is public humiliation. For this, you brought us." "No, son, I brought you so you could hear the truth, a truth that has been hidden under lies for too long." I approached him and looked him straight in the eyes. "You called me toxic. You told me I was manipulative. You excluded me from your life while taking every dollar you could. And when I finally said no, you threatened me. That Brenda was right about me." Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but my voice did not tremble. "I am not the toxic one, David. I am the one who raised you alone after your father died. I am the one who worked sewing until my fingers hurt so you could have a good education. I am the one who was always there when you needed me." Brenda stood up. "I am not going to listen to this anymore." "Sit down," said Grace, with a voice that admitted no reply. "You are going to listen to everything." Brenda stood there, but did not leave. I took out the last document from the envelope, and now comes the part of the assets I promised to announce. All eyes were fixed on the document I held in my hands. I saw how David and Brenda leaned forward expectant, probably thinking that after all this dramatic scene, I would end up leaving them everything anyway, because that is how mothers are. How little they really knew me. This I said, lifting the certified paper, is my new will signed and notarized before Mr. Miller 2 weeks ago. The lawyer, who had arrived discreetly a few minutes before and stood by the door, nodded. "In this will, I have made very important decisions about my assets, and I want everyone to know them so there are no confusions in the future." David swallowed audibly. "My house, this house I inherited from my parents, and that has been the home of this family for 3 generations, will be inherited entirely by my grandson, Matthew." The silence broke with Brenda's exclamation. "What, let me finish. The house will be put in a trust administered by my sister Grace and Mr. Miller until Matthew turns 25. At that moment, he will decide what to do with it. Meanwhile, I will live here until my death, and after the house will remain under legal custody until my grandson is of the stipulated age." "That is unfair," shouted Brenda, forgetting her composure completely. "David is your only son. It is his right. A right is earned with respect and dignity, not with humiliations and lies," I responded calmly. "And if you allow me to continue," David was pale as a ghost, but said nothing. "Second, my grandmother's antique clock, this piece that has marked the hours of our family for more than 100 years, will not be inherited to anyone in particular. It will be donated to the Family History Museum that the neighborhood parish has, where all family members can visit it, but no one can sell it or claim it as their own." I saw how Brenda's eyes filled with tears of rage. I knew she had already planned to sell that clock. A piece like that could easily be worth $5,000 or more in the antiques market. "Third, about the $10,000 David owes me, I have decided to forgive that debt." David looked up, hopeful. But I continued that forgiveness comes with a condition. "This is the last thing you will receive from me in financial terms. There will be no more loans, there will be no more financial help, there will be no more free sewing jobs. From this moment, our relationship will be strictly family, not financial." Mom started David. I haven't finished. "Fourth, I have established a savings account for Matthew's college education. $1,500 that I set aside from my pension during the last year. That account can only be accessed by him when he turns 18, and solely for educational expenses. Neither you nor anyone else can touch that money." Grace smiled with pride. Faith and the uncles nodded in approval. "And fifth, I have established a visitation schedule with my grandson. A supervised video call every week of 30 minutes and an in-person visit of 2 hours every 15 days here at my house. These visits will be supervised by Grace or Rachel to ensure they actually happen and that Matthew is okay." "Supervised," exploded Brenda. "Now it turns out we are not trusted as parents." "No," I answered, looking her straight in the eyes. "I do not trust you as intermediaries between my grandson and me. For 3 years you have used Matthew as an excuse to ask me favors, but have denied me real access to him. That is over." Mr. Miller approached. "Everything, Mrs. Olivia just mentioned is legally documented and certified. Any attempt to contest these provisions will be very difficult to sustain in court, especially with all the evidence she has collected of financial and emotional abuse." Brenda stood up abruptly, her heels echoing against the mosaic floor. "This is ridiculous. David, let's go. We are not going to stay here to listen to how your mother humiliates us." But David did not move. He was sitting with his head in his hands. "David, I told you we are leaving." "Wait," he murmured. For the first time since all this started, I saw something in my son's eyes I hadn't seen in years. shame. He stood up slowly and looked at me. "Mom, I didn't know you felt that way." The bitter laughs of several people in the room resonated at that declaration. "You didn't know?" asked Grace incredulously. "You didn't know that excluding your mother from family gatherings would make her feel bad. You didn't know that asking her for money constantly without paying her back was wrong." David opened his mouth, but no word came out. I approached him. Despite everything, he was still my son, the boy I carried in my arms, who I cured when he was sick, who I comforted when he cried. "David, I love you. That is never going to change, but I am not going to allow you to keep treating me like an ATM with feelings. I am not going to keep begging for a place in your life, but you are my mom exactly. I am your mom, not your maid nor your bank, and it is time you understand the difference." Brenda took David by the arm. "You already heard what she wanted to say. Let's go." But before they could take a step, Matthew came running from the garden where he had been playing with Faith's children. Grandma Olivia. My heart melted seeing him. My 7-year-old grandson, with his bright eyes and uncomplicated smile, hugged my legs. "Can we eat the cornbread you baked now? It smells so good." I crouched to his level and hugged him tight. "Of course, my love. Go with your Aunt Grace to the kitchen. She will give you a piece. And you aren't coming in a moment. First, I have to finish talking with your dad." Matthew ran toward the kitchen, oblivious to all the tension in the room. When I turned, Brenda looked at me with pure hate. "This isn't going to stay like this, Olivia. You are going to regret humiliating us in front of the whole family." "The only thing I regret," I responded with a firm voice, "is having kept quiet for so long, having allowed you to treat me how you treated me, having put your comfort before my dignity." I turned toward everyone present. "I want all of you to be witnesses of what was said here today. Because I know Brenda will try to flip this story, make me look like the bad one, but now everyone knows the truth." Murmurs of support ran through the room. Faith stood up. "Aunt Olivia, everyone here is with you. What you did today took a lot of courage." Grace approached and took my hand. "My sister is right. It was time someone put a stop to these abuses." David finally spoke with a broken voice. "Mom, I need time to process all this. You have all the time in the world, son. But if you want to have a relationship with me again, it is going to be on my terms. With respect, with honesty, without manipulations. Let's go." David insisted, Brenda pulling him by the arm. This time, he let himself be led. I saw them walk toward the door. Before leaving, David turned one last time. "Can I come talk to you this week? You can come whenever you want, son, but only if you come to talk for real, not to ask for money." He nodded and left. When the door closed behind them, I felt all the weight of the last months finally lift from my shoulders. My grandmother's clock struck 5, and for the first time in a long time, that sound brought me peace instead of sadness. The days after the family meeting were strange. A different silence filled my house, but it was no longer the silence of loneliness, it was the silence of peace. Grace came every day to drink coffee with me. Faith called me to tell me the whole family was on the side of truth. Rachel practically moved into my house during that first week, making sure I was okay. From David, not a word for 5 days. Until Thursday afternoon, he appeared at my door alone without Brenda. He had swollen eyes as if he hadn't slept well in days. "Can I come in, Mom?" I moved aside without saying anything. We sat in the living room in the same place where I had exposed all the truths. My grandmother's clock marked 4 in the afternoon. David rubbed his hands nervously. I had to ask Brenda to leave the house for a few days. I looked at him surprised. After the meeting, we went home and fought for hours. She said you were a manipulator, that all this was theater to make her look bad. But I could no longer keep believing her. His voice broke. I was reviewing our bank statements. You were right about everything. The debts, the unnecessary expenses, the way we lived above our means. Brenda had told me we were fine, but we are about to have the car repossessed and possibly the house. And you just realized I realized before Mom, but I didn't want to see it. It was easier to believe her blame. You justify everything with excuses." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "I called Aunt Grace, asked her if everything you said was true. She confirmed everything. The times you spoke badly of me with her never existed. Everything was Brenda defaming you, and I let her do it." The pain in his voice was genuine. But I had learned not to get carried away only by emotions. And now what, David? Do you come to ask my forgiveness, hoping everything returns to how it was before? No. I come to tell you that you were right about everything, and that I understand if you no longer want to know anything about me. That took me by surprise. I was a terrible son. I used you, I ignored you, I humiliated you, and the worst is I let my wife treat you worse than I would ever allow anyone to treat a stranger, much less my mother. He stood up and walked toward the window, looking at the lilac bushes. Dad would have given me a tremendous beating if he saw how I treated you. He always said you were the strongest woman he knew, and I saw you as weak as someone I could take advantage of. What happened with Brenda, I asked her to go to her parents' house for a while. I need to think clearly. I need to decide if I want to continue in a marriage built on lies and appearances. Matthew asks for you every day. My heart squeezed. How is he confused? He doesn't understand why suddenly he can't see his grandmother. I told him it was my fault that I made very big mistakes. We stayed in silence for several minutes. Only the tick-tock of the clock filled the space. Mom, I do not come to ask you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve it. I only came to tell you that I am going to try to be better. I am going to fix the disaster of my life. I am going to seek help to handle the debts. And I am going to make sure Matthew grows up knowing the grandmother I had not the mother-in-law Brenda invented. I approached him and put my hand on his shoulder. Son, I never said I didn't want you in my life. I only said I was not going to allow more abuses. If you really want to change, I am going to support you. But things are going to be different. I know, and I accept it. Visits with Matthew remain supervised for 3 months. Afterwards, we will evaluate. Understood. No loans. If you have financial problems, find an advisor. I am not your solution. I will never ask you for money again, Mom. I swear, by Dad's memory. And about Brenda, that is your decision. But if you stay together, she is going to have to earn my respect again. It is not going to be automatic. I understand. She has a lot to change. And if she cannot do it, then I will have to make difficult decisions. I hugged him. My son, my only son. Broken, regretful, but finally seeing the truth. I love you, David. I am always going to love you. But love does not mean allowing them to destroy you. I love you, Mom, and I am sorry. Really, I am so sorry. We cried together, a cry that washed away years of pain, lies, and misunderstandings. When he left that afternoon, I felt different. Not completely healed, but yes, on the way. 6 months later. Saturday morning dawned fresh. I put on my sewing apron and opened the windows of my studio so the air could enter. There was a group of 5 neighborhood ladies waiting in my living room. They were my new students. After everything that happened, I decided to convert my studio into something bigger, a space where women of all ages could learn to sew, but also where they could talk, support each other, share their stories. Good morning, ladies. I greeted while entering with a tray of coffee and sweet bread. Good morning, Teacher Olivia. They responded in unison. That is how they called me now. Teacher. I liked it. While I taught them how to make the perfect hem on a skirt, I heard the entrance door. Grandma. It was Matthew. David entered behind him. Alone. Brenda and he had separated 3 months ago. It was a difficult but necessary decision. She refused to accept any responsibility for what she had done, and my son finally found the courage to put a limit. My love. I left the fabric and ran to hug my grandson. "Grandma, look what I made at school." He showed me a drawing of a house with purple lilac bushes. "It is your house." The teacher said we should draw our favorite place. My eyes filled with tears. It is the most beautiful drawing I have seen in my life. David smiled. He looked different, thinner, a little tired, but with clearer eyes. "Can I speak with you a moment?" "Mom, I left Matthew with the ladies who received him with sweets and affection and went out to the garden with my son. I got a second job," he told me, "at night as a project consultant. It is heavy, but with that, I will be able to liquidate the debts in 2 years instead of 5. I am glad you are taking responsibility. I also started therapy. The psychologist has helped me understand many things about how I behaved with you, about how I let Brenda manipulate me about everything." I hugged him. "I am proud of you, son." "Mom, I know 6 months have passed, but I want you to know that every day I think about what happened. And every day I work to be the son you deserve. You already are, David. The simple fact that you are trying to change already makes you the son I always knew you could be." My grandmother's clock struck 11 from inside the house. Matthew ran out to the garden. "Grandma, the ladies say you teach them how to make needlepoint crafts like yours. Can I stay to watch?" "Of course, my love." The 3 of us went back inside. David sat in a corner watching how I taught. Matthew was fascinated with the colored threads. That afternoon, after everyone left, I stayed alone in my studio. I took my mother's wool shawl and put it over my shoulders. I walked toward the living room and stood in front of the empty space on the wall where my grandmother's clock used to hang. I had donated it to the parish museum last week in a small ceremony. The whole family was there. Father Lawrence said some beautiful words about the importance of preserving family memory without clinging to objects, and although that clock was no longer on my wall, I could hear its chimes in my memory. Each chime reminded me that my grandmother was right. The family remains united not by a clock, but by love, respect, and dignity. I looked through the window toward the lilac bushes that swayed with the wind. My house was no longer the center of big gatherings like before, but it was something better. It was a refuge of peace, a place of teaching, a space where my dignity lived intact. David came every Saturday with Matthew. We sat to eat, we chatted about life, about challenges, about dreams. There were no more secrets, nor lies, nor manipulations, only real conversations between mother, son, and grandson. Grace organized small family gatherings once a month. Everyone respected my space and my time. And I had finally learned that true love is not begged for, nor bought with money or favors. True love is honored with presence, respect, and coherent actions. I sat in my chair next to the window, the same one where I cried so many nights of loneliness. But now, when I sat there, I did not feel sadness. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for having found the courage to say no. Gratitude for having defended my dignity when everyone expected me to keep quiet. Gratitude for having realized that it was better to be alone with peace than accompanied with pain. The afternoon sun entered through the window, illuminating the colored threads of my studio. Tomorrow, I would have new students. Next week, Matthew would come to stay the full weekend, something David proposed, and I accepted with clear conditions. Life continued different from how I had imagined it, but infinitely better than the nightmare I woke up from 6 months ago. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, feeling my mother's shawl over my shoulders, imagining my grandmother smiling at me from wherever she was. "I did it, grandmother," I whispered. I recovered my dignity, and in that moment of perfect silence, I knew that was the best inheritance I could leave Matthew. Not a house, not an antique clock, but the example of a woman who learned to value herself. Because true wealth is not in what you possess, it is in what you do not allow them to take from you. Final reflection. If this story touched your heart, if you recognized in it pieces of your own life or that of someone you love, I want you to know something. It is never too late to recover your dignity. It does not matter how many years you have kept quiet, how many times you have said yes when you wanted to say no, how much love you have given expecting crumbs back. Always, always you can change the rules of the game, because valuing yourself is not selfishness. It is survival. Setting limits is not cruelty. It is self-love. And distancing yourself from those who hurt you, even if they are family, is not abandonment. It is choosing yourself. Today I invite you to reflect. Is there someone in your life who treats you like Brenda and David treated Olivia? Is there someone who only looks for you when they need something? If the answer is yes, this is your moment to wake up, to make inventory of your life, to decide what you deserve more. And if you know someone who is living this situation, share this story. Sometimes listening to someone else's pain gives us the courage to face our own. Leave me in the comments. Where are you watching me from? Did this story remind you of someone? What decision would you take in Olivia's place? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to continue sharing real-life stories that teach us, move us, and remind us that we are never alone in our battles. Remember, love that does not value you is not love, it is habit. And you deserve more than habit. You deserve dignity. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. Until the next story, and may you never forget, your value is not defined by who hurts you, but by who decides to honor you. The end.